Congratulations.
That's my preset. He said, you're smart. But,
Alright, don't forget the voice saying you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So we're going to get started. Subcommittee 2 will come to order. Everybody, you don't have to keep going. Alright. So I have Farrell, Rasul, Poindexter has a commitment across the way. He walks in, he's here. All right. Delegate Farrell, let Delegate Poindexter go because he has something to say. No problem. 10 o'clock. Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Farrell. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, House Bill
2002.
2002, yes, sir. This is really a transparency information and bill that would also give us information on cost ascertainment. The bill requires the Department of Social Services to collect and collate refugee data, refugees settled in Virginia, and then provide a report to the governor and the General Assembly. On the cost part of it, we're looking for better estimates, obviously, in order to prepare our budget, and this is a component of it. It is true today, and very recently, DSS stood up a website that would cover the State Department refugees, the official ones that come from federal Washington, D.C. It's an excellent site. DSS has guided me through quite a bit of it. But these are just the refugees, of course, that come in via the federal process. They're collected, non-identified. Okay, what do I mean by that? The number of refugees by agency that are under contract with DSS for settlement and resettlement services, containing age, gender, national origin, and the jurisdiction or the where they're placed in Virginia program. I'd ask a question that is already being collected, or some of it, why the bill? My intent with that is to continue collecting it because things can change administratively. And secondly, to highlight to the support the case and for sure the people and money communities would be interested in. Having said that, I'll just review very briefly the cost containment part of the benefits. Refugees are eligible for benefits just like anybody else. It's now 100%, of course, that's federal dollars. Advantage requires a maintenance of effort, so there is a Virginia component on the cost side. Medical assistance is typically Medicaid, and we had that state match of Medicaid, which is growing very good in state budget. There are a couple of exceptions. If there are no children involved, then the refugee is eligible for refugee medical assistance or refugee cash assistance, both federally funded. There's a second exception to eligibility, and that would be the income level. In other words, someone from Iraq or Afghanistan has helped U.S. forces and are in personal danger and they're refugee. If they bring their money with them, or they have source of money, then they would not be eligible from an income perspective. So in summary, the bill then authorizes and directs DSS to collect the refugee data and provide a summary report, and there is no fiscal impact statement associated with the bill. The data is theirs in a few hours of collecting and adding to an existing report. That's a summary of the bill, Mr. Chairman. I would like to compliment DSS on working with me.
A couple questions just so I know. So the Department resettlement agency, does that mean more than just the words? Is that a term of art, or is that something that?
From my perspective, these are nonprofit or church-related organizations that are under contract to the Department of Social Services. Or maybe not that.
Mr. Chair, yeah, that's correct. They are nonprofit agencies, I think many of which also contract with the federal government, but that is the term of art that they use for agencies that provide resettlement services.
Okay. So it would not apply to groups that were not resettlement agencies? Okay. And a food bank that just gave food to anybody who walked in would not be a resettlement agency, although some of the people that might take benefit from it would be some of the people that's limited to the resettlement agencies.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. It would only cover the agencies who are actually providing the resettlement of finding you a place to live, is my understanding. That's who it would cover.
Resettlement services. I see, okay. All right, I got it. Anybody have any questions for the patron? Delegate Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The point so what purposes is this bill coming? I think there's some sensitivity to getting information about immigrants and possibly tracking them or deporting them. I mean, that's sort of the rhetoric that's out there, that's sort of the underlying thing. What purpose are we collecting information?
Issues with that there are issues and different opinions on refugees. Well, I think it's only fair that the public be aware of the information so that they can formulate their opinions. And I think it's only fair for us to know what it costs the state of Virginia. From gathering this data, we can get much closer to what we have to plan for.
Okay.
Any other member of the panel have any questions? Delegate Levine.
Mr. Chairman, the commission has a series of questions.
Gentleman has the floor.
Delegate Poindexter, the fiscal impact statement says in paragraph 8 that agencies under contract with the Department's Office of Newcomer Services are already required to provide this information. This legislation will provide legislative authority for the department to collect this information from agencies not under contract. My question is, what are the agencies not under contract that would be included here?
Those agencies that are not necessarily dealing, or maybe doing that, that are not necessarily dealing with refugees that come from the federal government through the federal state department program.
Could the patron give me an example of such an agency and such a refugee?
There's one in Roanoke, I do not know its name.
But, I'm sorry, is the purpose to track all refugees into Virginia? Is that the goal?
That would be the goal, that any agency that is providing refugee settlement services in Virginia, that DSS would be authorized to ask them to provide the non-identifying data, simply the number, where they're settled, age, gender, national origin. That's all they're collecting there, and that's the bill would keep it that way.
And these agencies that are not under contract with the Department's Office of Newcomer Services would be just individual non-profits? I'm just trying to understand who this affects.
Right. They could be a non-profit, Virginia-based. It could be an out-of-state non-profit with an affiliate in Virginia. The bill would require, and I understand, that affiliate to report the data to DSS.
Would this include non-profits that have no connection with the government?
Well, I don't quite understand the question.
I mean, if there's a non-profit that's resettling refugees in Virginia that isn't getting funds from Virginia to do that, would that be covered under this legislation?
Yes.
And the last question I have is why is it important to give the exact locality where each individual is placed?
Citizens of the Commonwealth, in my judgment, want to know if they're refugees in their community.
At the appropriate time, I'd like to speak to the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Any other member have any questions for the patron?
Move your report, Mr. Chairman.
The motion to make a report. We might have to get public comment. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We now have the bill properly before us. Any member of the public like to be heard on House Bill 2002? line up, and we'll be happy to take comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Charlie Schmidt with the ACLU of Virginia. Our reading of the bill states just by the fiscal impact that this puts a burden or at least places some sort of restriction or compliance standard on agencies that don't deal with the State Department of Social Services, that it also places the same reporting burden on agencies that deal directly with the federal government. And obviously, our issue with that is a constitutional preemption argument that going back to, probably the 30s, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that local governments may not discriminate or place burdens on federal contractors or in any way obstruct their power to serve government as they are intended to serve it. There's all the way up to recently with the 1990, any regulations imposed on someone who deals directly with the federal government has as much potential to obstruct government functions as the regulations imposed on the government itself. The court has required that regulations be one that is imposed on some basis unrelated to the objective status as a government contractor or supplier, meaning you can't target particular federal contractors. So these agencies that aren't contracted with the state are dealing directly with the federal government, and the state of Virginia can't place any burdens or requirements on those contractors. They can ask, and it's my understanding that many of these agencies already voluntarily report this information. The state of Virginia can also ask the federal government to make this a requirement, and my thoughts are that this will come with the new administration, that these requirements, these reporting requirements will be there. But as we read this bill, we find it that you're preempted from doing this. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. We have a question. Sir, gentlemen. Sir, ACLU, I'm sorry, I didn't know that your name, and I apologize for not having done so. Delegate Kogi has a question for you, I'm sorry. Tell us your name again.
Charlie Schmidt from the ACLU.
Schmidt or Smith?
Schmidt.
Mr. Schmidt. Delegate Kogi has a question.
I just have a question. I know that we collect non-identifying information in other situations, especially concerning health conditions, where we collect information on how many people in Region A or Region B have heart conditions or diabetes, and we keep that information, and it's just statistical information that may be of interest. So how is this type, since it is non-identifying, how is this type of information differ from the information that we collect on individuals, also non-identifying, concerning their personal health?
Sure. No, you're correct that any unidentified, we're not concerned with the actual bits of information that are collected because there's not any personal information collected. Here's just statistics. It's the fact that you're requiring a source that is directly contracting with the federal government. You can't require the federal government or the source, the contractor that's contracting directly with the federal government. You can't require them to report this information. You can ask for it. And the state is mandated in some of the same code section. The state requires of its own agencies and localities to report statistical information that you just mentioned. But the state of Virginia can't demand or require information be reported from the federal government or contractors when they're doing their business, such as resettling refugees. They can do it within their state agency, which they are doing, but they can't broaden that to individual contractors that are directly contracting with the federal government and not the state.
Yes, sir. Identify yourself, please tell us your thoughts on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm John Bauman. I am the Director for CWS, Church World Services Refugee Resettlement here in Virginia. We have two offices, one here in Richmond and one in Harrisonburg. And so contrasting those two offices might be instructive. There was a little bit of discussion already about resettlement agencies that contract with the department and those that don't. So we're a good example. Our Harrisonburg office, both offices receive federal funding. And in our world, when we say resettlement agencies, it's almost a definition of resettlement agency as one that receives funding directly from the federal government, the so-called reception and placement grant. And so we all receive that funding, and then usually some other federal grants as well. A lot of agencies also receive money through the department, through the Office of Newcomer Services. So in our case, our Harrisonburg office is funded by the department, but our Richmond office is not. Both agencies actually do report through ONS's database system. The Harrisonburg office, of course, is under contract with the department, so they have to do it. But the Richmond office, we do it voluntarily here in Richmond. So our concern with the bill is the same as was previously brought up, and that is, for us, it really is a pretty significant administrative burden in the Richmond office, which does not receive Department of Social Services funding, to do this reporting. We do it voluntarily, but we don't feel that we should be compelled to do it if we aren't funded by the department to do it. So I hope that that's helpful. That's the basis of our objection. Again, I'd like to emphasize ONS, the Office of Newcomer Services, is an excellent partner, so that's why we find a way to get the extra reporting done, but we have massive reporting for our federal grants, and to layer this on and have it be required, whether a resettlement agency receives department funding or not, we feel is going too far.
I have a question, but does anybody else have a question for the gentleman?
Mr. Chairman,
Y'all can stop.
and help educate me here just a little bit, so I go on. How are localities informed that these folks, I mean, there's going to have to be resources from the localities to support these individuals. How are they notified that these individuals are being moved in? A couple of these are coming up in a different committee, and I was wondering why we were hearing it in this committee, and it's because this is to the Social Services Code with the expectation that we will be providing services to these individuals. So how do the localities know that these individuals are being located in that area, and what services are going to be required?
Right, that's a great question. All agencies, whether they only get the federal funding or they get both federal and state funding from the department, are required to do community dialogue meetings, so at least quarterly. And in Virginia, again, the Office of Newcomer Services in the department really has done an excellent job of kind of beefing up those community dialogues and including a lot of people. So the method is you go into a community before you start resettling significant numbers of refugees and meet with local government officials, health department, school, local police. We've got one on Friday of this week with folks here in Richmond. The FBI's there, everyone's there. And so, and in Harrisonburg, for example, we have been resettling a few families in Woodstock, which is outside of Harrisonburg, and we've had these meetings in Virginia. We call them, I think it's Virginia Community Capacity Initiative meetings. And through that same mechanism, talking with local police, school, and anyone else who's interested, we inform communities that we're planning to bring families there.
Mr. Chairman? I applaud the community meetings and the engagement of the community. Is there any formal process where the information that's requested in this bill is transmitted to the local government so that they can take action for developing plans for supporting these individuals?
I would have to defer to ONS. For the department-funded agencies, they are required to submit the information to ONS. I'm not sure if there is a mechanism automatically or if it's on request that ONS would pass the information along to localities. I would have to defer to
Mr.
that.
Chairman?
Doug, stop.
If I haven't been told, how would I know to request the information?
If you haven't been told
If I haven't been informed
that the information is available,
that these folks are coming in, how would I know to request the information of what I would have to support these folks with.
Yeah, again, there may be an existing mechanism already in place whereby ONS is transmitting it to localities. I'm just not aware of it, so I don't want to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just, again, just to give us some background, within an order of magnitude, can you tell us how many people you work with? I don't know, 5, 50, 500, 5,000?
Yeah, for CWS, we expect, well, today's going to change things, I think, if the news is correct, but we had been scheduled to receive, or I think, 210 folks in the Richmond area and 245 in
Over a year, a month? The whole
over a year.
Got it,
federal
okay, so
fiscal year.
a couple hundred a year.
Yep.
Okay. And the information here, because it's de-identified, I don't want to assume anything. Do you have the information for each one, age, gender, national origin, locality, where they're going?
Yes.
Okay. Is that part of the information that you are sending, along with a lot more information, I assume, to some other place, group, agency, federal, state, somewhere?
Yes, we have several federal grants, so they all require different kinds of reporting.
Okay.
And some of that is automatically pulled by our national offices and so on. For the Virginia grant, you're correct, there's a lot more information for the Social Services Department funded agencies that goes in other than the information that's in the bill. A lot of it's just related to program outcomes.
I guess what I'm asking is the information, it looks like it's 1, 2, 3, age, gender, national origin, the locality, then whether they were placed through the U.S. It's sort of two issues. One would be you literally don't have the information and have to have somebody look up each person and call them and figure it out. Another category is
You have it.
you have it, and in my mental picture, you've got a chart with 90 columns that you send into the feds, and this would ask you to take all but 86 of those out, even the 4. Is this a programming issue? When you say it will cost you money, what's the cost?
Yeah,
Not in a dollar figure, but what's the cost?
using our agency as an example, the concern is that the Harrisonburg office is department funded, so no problem there. We think they should supply the information to ONS, to the department, and they do.
When you say the department, you mean?
Department of Social Services. The Richmond office is not funded through DSS, through the Department of Social Services. We voluntarily provide the information, so this is the core of our concern about the bills. We don't feel that we should be compelled unless we receive Department of Social Services funding.
Understood. Okay, all right. Thank you. Any other questions were prompted by that? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Yes, ma'am. Step up, identify yourself, and tell us your thoughts about the bill.
Kim Bobo, I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. We are concerned about this bill. First, we support Church World Service and all the religious agencies, and if they oppose the bill, then we believe we should oppose the bill. But secondly, we're also concerned about what's the purpose here. Why do we need this information on national origin? Given the environment that we are in right now, and that there is clearly some efforts to stop people coming in from other countries, we're concerned about the uses that this information is designed to be used for. So we, at this point, oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Stop it.
Ma'am, could you get back up for a second?
Sorry. Everybody, we don't always know whether we have questions until you're already walking away. That's fine. Delegate Stelly.
It's extremely important for, when we're providing services to individuals, for us to be able to communicate them and understand their cultural background in order to make social services available to them. We face this every day in healthcare. If I'm a locality and I'm going to be taking in refugees from an area where I don't have that expertise for communication, wouldn't you see that being valuable to me to know? I mean, everybody assumes a negative aspect to this. This is an extremely important information for me to be able to communicate and provide services to that individual. So whether they're coming from China or Afghanistan, I have to have the resources to communicate with them. And if I don't know that, I can't communicate. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think there are are some legitimate reasons for doing this. And again, perhaps there are ways to modify this to say, in order to accommodate social services better or something. But again, I think given the environment that we are in right now in the country, particularly Muslims in this country are fearful about this kind of thing, where we're targeting particular countries to exclude people coming from those countries. And so I think if there were a way to modify this where the language said, in order to provide better social services, to create a more welcoming environment, I think there are ways that the General Assembly could create some language that says that we are a welcoming commonwealth. And I think the way this is presented, it raises hackles and concerns, and certainly does for us.
Yes, ma'am. Identify yourself, tell us your thoughts on the bill.
Hi, my name is Lana Kiste Martinez. I'm representing the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations. And I wanted to answer in part the gentleman's question about, is this a valuable service? And in some ways, yes, I think that the information could be very valuable for service providers. However, we don't understand why it's necessary to mandate that every organization report on that information. You know, we think that the organizations have the best relationship with their clients who they service, and that they can identify where those needs are and report perhaps on people who do have a deficiency when receiving services. So those are our thoughts on the bill.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Any other member of the public like to be heard on this measure? Okay, Delegate Levine in line. Yes, sir.
Yes,
We have the motion has been made and seconded to properly report. The bill is before us. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, speaking to the bill.
Yes, sir.
I oppose this legislation. I understand that sometimes it can be useful to address the needs of people, and I agree with what the last speaker said, a young woman, that if people have the need to provide social services, I'm quite certain that the good work that the church group does, they could contact a locality and say, we have an Ethiopian child, you know, can we get a translator or something like that. My concern is what the other people opposed to have said. Look, we are a country of immigrants. We have people from all over the globe. The vast majority of us, if we're not descended from Native Americans, are descended from immigrants. And this idea of sort of a tracking system, where we're going to track every refugee, including those that are not being funded by Virginia. These are just people who are coming in, nonprofits working with the federal government, bringing it in, and we're going to track every one of them and find out where they go. You know, yeah, if 1,000 people from El Salvador and Alexandria, they're not easily identifiable. But if there's one Syrian child, age 12, whose parents are dead, and that child is in some small town in Virginia, and everyone knows that this 12-year-old from Syria is in that, it's going to be pretty easy to find that child. One 12-year-old girl from Syria in one small town is very easy to track. And if the goal is not to help that child, but actually to identify everyone and allow everyone to know, and there is a lot of feeling against a lot of immigrants that are being resettled, and I'm just very concerned about tracking and stigmatizing these people. Again, if agencies want to provide this information to Virginia, many are, like the man from the church group, and if that helps, that's great. But Virginia is not involved in resettling these people. So unless we really believe as a community that we need to watch every foreigner in our midst and find out every one of them and find out where they are and their age and their locality, I'm just very concerned that this leads to stigma and leads to kind of a tracking system. And you know, they didn't track my great-grandparents when they came here at Ellis Island, and they did okay. And if the federal government says these people are safe, I don't want refugees treated like sexual predators, where we watch every moment of them. So I intend to oppose this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Stahli and Hoagie. Yost.
Mr. Chairman, speaking of the bill,
Delegate Stahli.
this bill is written to the social services section of our code. It's not written to the public safety section of our code. These individuals are here legally. We as a state now have a requirement to provide them services just as we would any other citizen residing in this state. And if we don't know what those issues are, where they come from, the ages, whether they're children or adults, we simply cannot do our job. And I understand that people are trying to make, political hay on this issue, but this is an important information for localities and our social services to know in order to provide services to the very individuals that we're trying to protect. And to take and build some type of really negative thing about what is actually an effort to help people, I just have a really hard time with that.
Mr. Chairman, will gentleman yield?
No, just a second, you can come back to you, but at this point I've got Fogey and then Yost.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on Delegate Stotley's comments. This is not some kind of conspiracy. What this committee is purposed to do is to provide things of health, welfare, and institutions. And we look at stats. We look at the health stats I mentioned earlier. We do oversee social services. And so if there is a larger requisition for funds in a certain area, sometimes we may need to know why or, for what purpose. We need to distinguish where the funds are going and for what purposes so that it doesn't raise other questions. So this is the committee, just like Delegate Stotley said, it's not going to public safety, it's not going anywhere. It's coming here so you, Mr. Levine, can help understand what's going on and be part of this. If it was going to another committee, you may not even have the opportunity today to offer your concerns, but it's coming here because this is what we do.
Delegate Yost.
I have a question, and this is probably for Sarah or David. Do we have other areas of the code, or is there other places where the state mandates that we collect or that non-state agencies report information back to us?
Joe, want to repeat the question, staff?
Do we have other sections of the code where we require that non-state agencies are reporting information back to us similar to what's being requested here?
Does the gentleman mean nonprofit agencies?
Yeah.
Non-state agencies, specific.
Mr. Chair, I feel that we do. I don't have any particular instances that I can give you right now. I would say, commenting on the bill, that the information, including the age, gender, everything in the bill is already being provided except for information about immigrants who are not considered refugees and are not being provided resettlement services through the refugee program. So really, that's the only information that we're adding here. And this is the only way to do it because that information would not otherwise be available.
Delegate Levine.
So, actually, the same question then. So, we know, is it true that we already know under the law how many people are coming from a certain region? This just alerts us that they're refugees rather than just immigrants. Is that right?
That's correct. All of this information, including each of these prongs regarding the number, gender, age, and so on, is already provided.
So localities wanting to provide services to a 12-year-old girl from Syria or a 14-year-old boy from Ethiopia already know they're there. The one thing that would be in addition is now we know they're refugees rather than just immigrants. That's all this bill does, is tell us they're refugees rather than immigrants.
It's actually the opposite. The information is currently being provided about refugees. This would also get information on immigrants who are not considered refugees and are being provided services through the refugee resettlement program.
I think I got it. So one last speaking to the bill, Mr. Chairman, I promise to make it brief. It sounds to me like if people need services, they can request these services, they can let communities know these services are needed. It can be done on a case-by-case basis when people need it. But it sounds to me like we are trying to label certain people in our communities, and that's why I missed the bill. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate the gentleman. Any other comments from any member of the panel? Okay, the bill is before us on a motion to report. There's no need to refer. It's already been seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Noes? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chairman. It's pretty clear we're going to have a Tuesday night meeting. That's fine. Just so everybody's keeping score here.
It's already decided?
I know, but we are 40 minutes left. Okay, Delegate Farrell, 1548. And then we have Sewell, Delegate Price here. Who's
No, sir.
Esther, I see. Okay,
There is a substitute, Mr. Chairman.
if staff would distribute a substitute. All right, so this was the issue of a different approach. Go ahead, I'll let the gentleman explain it, but
Mr. Chairman, in layman's terms, we're trying to make it a little bit faster and easier to find somebody, to help somebody who is deemed unfit to make their decisions because they're in a mental health crisis, whether they're having a schizophrenic episode or, and Delegate Yost will be more familiar with other types of episodes somebody may have, where they may be walking around and actually, as far as their regular health, be deemed fit, but their mental capacity to make decisions is not there, and this would expand the list of people who can make that decision from just psychiatrists and clinical psychologists to nurse psychiatric nurse
and
practitioners.
I looked at the sub with staff, and let's adopt the sub. Is there a motion to adopt the sub? Second. All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. The sub's before us. So, just so we understand the category we're talking about, this is, Sarah, did you distribute the sub?
Yes, it's out.
Okay.
Do you need another copy?
Literally, I've lost the one you gave me 5 minutes ago. Thank you. All right, so, you just want to make sure, and staff, if we have this wrong, this is a good time to tell us. All right, so the first thing would be, this would only be people who have an advanced medical directive in place.
Correct. Yes, sir.
It would only be for the purpose of saying they should be committed to the facility, but it doesn't do anything else. You can't force them to take drugs in the street. Once they're at the facility, it doesn't change the rules for being at the facility. This would be the decision of whether or not to go inpatient, quote unquote, voluntarily. In other words, that this would be someone.
Mr. Chair, I have two experts who would be better to answer your technical questions than I would, to be honest with you, sir. So if it's all right,
Let me just go to staff then. This is purely a drafting. Y'all are welcome to say what you think is a good idea or bad idea in terms of just making sure we all understand what the rule is. So, Sarah, are you ready to answer something? Okay, so again, only for people that have an advance directive, right? And only where they've designated someone to make the decision for them. Okay, and only about whether or not to enter the facility.
Yes.
Right.
So, I decide that my dad should be making decisions for me when I'm incapable. Right? I'm just doing the fact pattern. And Dad says, Rob needs to be committed. And I say, no way. That's the only fact pattern where this would actually come up.
And Mr. Chairman, as long as there's a written advance directive that's already.
Right, so I have an advanced medical directive, I designated Dad.
Correct.
And Dad says, you're having one of your episodes, and I say, no. That's the only time this will ever come up, right? Okay. And then the question is, somebody's got to decide whether I'm having an episode and Dad needs to make a decision, or whether I'm still of right mind and make my own choice. Okay. And then once I'm in, we go back to the normal rules where they want to give me Risperdal, and I say no, and I have to be repeatedly found to be okay. All right, so this is a very specific bill. Does everybody understand what the bill does? This is sort of an intricate body of law. We've looked at this for years. And unfortunately, I had turnover on the sub, so I'm not sure everybody was here the last time we did this, but, okay. Delegate Stelling, questions for the patron or the staff?
So that I'm clear, and you can phone any friend you want to. We are setting up dual standards. So one level of determination of competency for individuals who have advanced directives, and another level of competency for somebody who does not have an advanced directive.
I don't think that's right. Sarah, tell me.
The level of determining competency, there's no difference in standards there. All this does is creates a different process for making a decision as to whether that person is competent or not to make the decision. Regarding admission to a facility only, and only in cases in which there's a valid advance directive that authorizes an agent to make a decision
So,
about.
just a quick question here. So, currently, if I don't have an advance directive, I need a attending physician or licensed clinical psychologist to make that determination. Within this code, if I have an advance directive, I'm now allowing a PA, a nurse practitioner, a professional counselor, and a clinical social worker to make a determination on competency.
So this whole process, we're not going to come to any of these questions unless we have an advance directive in place. We are only talking about the universe of people having advance directives in the first place. In subsection B, what you see is the process for making, your advance directive can authorize any number of things, some things related to behavioral health care, mental health care, but some things that aren't also. So what you see in subsection B is the process for determining, in the case of healthcare generally, what we are doing is creating a new subsection C that pulls out a very, very narrow subset of decisions that come up in the case where you have the advance directive in place, you have authorized in your advance directive a person to make a decision about admitting you to a facility. Not only advance directives will include that piece, but if you have an advance directive that includes that piece, then in that situation, when we are talking about whether your agent may admit you to the facility, we've created a different process for determining, are you competent to make the decision? It's not a different standard, it just changes who may make that determination as to your competency.
Let me add something that it is important to me that it's not that social worker committing you. That's not what this says. The social worker says, your dad, the person you've already told us should make the decision, is the one who will make the decision. It's not, in other words, it's only where the advanced medical directive designates someone to be the decision maker, and the question is now, who gets to make the call? Is it dad or you? That's the.
And Mr. Chairman, I would say it's actually a step before that. It's who are we allowing to make the determination of competency?
Right.
So.
And what I'm saying is just, if the social worker says you're not competent, they don't then get to say, and therefore you go to the hospital. The
No.
social worker says, now dad is the one who we're going to let make this decision.
Understand that. What we are doing is changing who can say you're competent.
For purposes of letting a designated person, yeah, you have it, I think it's right.
So we are broadening
Yes,
who can determine you're competent if you have an advance directive.
who designates someone else to make the
This
decision.
is this is a significant change in policy
Oh, yeah.
of who can determine. And then it also raises the question, can I then withdraw my advance directive, which I'm allowed to do at any time? So,
Always, right.
so if somebody walks in and says, we're going to commit you, no, I withdraw my advance directive.
I mean, you can walk out the door. So, I mean, if the answer to the question is, once you get to the facility, and the first time they try to do something, then we're back to the normal process of, are you still incapable of making an informed decision? You've got to meet two doctors, get the doctors not treated. This gets you to the door of the facility more quickly. So, whether that's a substantial change, it's certainly a change, though. I mean, that's the basis for the bill.
Mr. Chair, and I think I understand the question, why do something different? Well, a lot of these times with mental health, when somebody probably needs to be committed and just one of these people agrees, a lot of the times, quite frankly, an episode can be associated with violence. And that doesn't actually occur a lot of times with regular health care. And that's quite frankly why we wanted to make it a little easier and faster. That's really the bottom line of why I was comfortable bringing the bill.
Delegate Hookie?
I'd share some of the concerns of Delegate Stolle too, because we're talking about advance directives. We're talking about the ability to withhold or withdraw health care from someone. And, you know, if they are incapable and they've already agreed to an advance directive, they're generally thinking it's because they've been rendered in a coma or in a terminal illness or some type of thing other than also their mental health at the moment. So, you know, we are talking about broadening language that concerns life or death decisions. And so I'm still pretty concerned about that and just, you know, wanting to make sure that we put every protection possible to safeguard someone's life.
And Mr. Chair, I would say what I would view as far as life or death, given physical condition, whether it's heart or something like that, we're not touching that at all, actually. It's just strictly a way to fast track it when somebody is in a mental health breakdown where the person who's already been directed by that person at a time of competency, the person they have trusted trusted to decide if they need to go somewhere. That we're giving that person the ability to find out faster if that person is right in their judgment to try to get that person to a place of safety. Because unfortunately, a lot of these incidents are, Delegate, you guys can speak to this, a lot of times there could be harm done to somebody very quickly that not only is the patient, but also somebody around. This also is a faster way where the person doesn't have to go to the traumatic event, but maybe going down to the jail waiting for a TDO when everybody knows that something's going on. So it really is, I think it's very narrow. I have people that can speak to it, but we're not messing with somebody's decision to take medication. We're not changing any of that. It's a matter of getting somebody quickly out of a situation where they can become violent is really the basis of it.
Okay. Delegate Farrell, we're looking at the list of people qualified to make a decision, and again, maybe staff could help. For the current process, which doesn't have, just the basic issue of how do you, when the argument becomes between the advanced medical directive and the patient right in front of you, which is the only time it ever matters is if there's a dispute. Currently, it requires what? The treating physician and an independent, or is that not?
Yes.
Okay, so what we said is the doctor right in front of you makes an initial call, and he calls over somebody that hasn't, we were worried about somebody just sort of being too invested, too involved, or too frustrated, or whatever, so we said bring in a second doctor, is that right?
It's not a second doctor, but an independent capacity reviewer. If you want me to provide you the definition of that.
Yes, please.
Let's see. It's a licensed physician or clinical psychologist who is qualified by training or experience to assess whether a person is capable of making an informed decision.
Okay, so for that list, that is, you get two of them, and it's limited to the treating doctor and a second person, which has to be an MD or a psychologist, is that right? Okay. Now, this does two things. This makes it one person, and it expands the list. And the list now says that the attending physician, again, or psychiatrist or licensed clinical psychologist, or licensed psychiatric NP, or, and then number 4 is the designee of the local community service board as defined by 3072-809. Does number 4, what does that allow? How broad is that? That's causing some of us.
I think number 4 is phrased pretty broadly in the sense that the local community services board can designate, and it doesn't list who they can designate. They can designate a person to make that.
I'm sorry. So 372809 just means the local community service board. It's not. It doesn't have a list of eligible designees.
I believe we do have a designee in that section. The designee of a local community services board means an examiner designated by the local community services board who is skilled in the assessment and treatment of mental illness, has completed a certification program approved by the department, is able to provide an independent examination of the person, is not related by blood or marriage to the person being evaluated, has no financial interest in the admission or treatment of the person being evaluated, has no investment interest in the facility detaining or admitting the person under this article, and except for employees of state hospitals and of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, is not employed by the facility.
Okay, so I guess getting to this, it doesn't require that you be a master's degree or in other words, it could include, gosh, it could include anybody, but it would include social workers, but certainly someone with less training than that if it was the designee.
Mr. Chair, that's
Training is
correct.
approved by the department.
Okay.
And they must be skilled in the assessment and treatment of mental illness. However that may be.
Dr. Stella, Delegate Stella.
I really applaud what you're trying to do here, but I do struggle with how far we are broadening our ability to commit somebody to a psychiatric hospital on the say of a single person.
Right, and believe me, I see the concern too, but in the end, weighing it, in a lot of rural areas, these people don't exist. These practitioners current code aren't there. They're just not there. In an issue of, and I understand the thought, but I also find it hard pressed to find a broad other instances outside of mental health where you have somebody who may be in crisis who is going to hurt somebody and may commit suicide or kill somebody. And I just wanted to make it faster to get them somewhere where they won't do that. And if they get there, and Delegate Gist knows more about this than I do, if they get there, the regular protocols take place. It's just a matter of getting them someplace safe where somebody on that current list can assess them. I mean, I think that it's a matter of getting them out of a place where they're going to hurt somebody. I mean, that's what convinced me to carry the bill, Mr. Chairman. I can't get past that argument.
Okay, and again, I'm sort of, I have the same concerns that were expressed by the delegate from Virginia Beach.
And I'm happy to, I have people that understand this process a lot
Well, I
better.
mean, I will say the part that gives me more solace is there are two people making the decision, which is the second person is dad, whoever the girlfriend, whoever it is you designated. And so the social worker says, look, I think you're decompensating. I think we need to have you go inpatient. You've already told us who you really want to have make that decision.
Correct.
And it's not the social worker, it's not anybody, it's dad, girlfriend,
And Mr.
whatever.
Chairman, I think it's a really important point to make is that this doesn't happen unless the person, when in right mind, has decided I'm okay with this happening. I mean, that's a very important point.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and hear from the public. At this point, the bill, while it is a substitute, has not been amended from the substitute. So go ahead and tell us your thoughts, both big picture and anything you want to tell us about it.
So I got a little lost on where we are. We've accepted the substitute.
We have, the substitute's been accepted,
Okay.
and we've made no changes to it.
I just want to reinforce that for this to work, it needs to be authorized ahead of time by the person who wrote their advance directive, that yes, I give my agent the authority to hospitalize me for up to 10 days. And that needs to be, that's part of the Ulysses Clause that has some special rules over it. This change also needs to be authorized in this language, I believe, in the advance directive to say, I'm also willing to have this one reviewer, the doctor, versus the two that are in law for everyone else. And so it's kind of a choice that I can make, or you can make when you're writing your advance directive, at what level you want to protect your rights from being hospitalized against your will. And it's not even necessarily in this situation against your will, but once you're unable to make a decision for yourself, you can't be hospitalized without a TDO. So it's an attempt to try to avoid the trauma of the TDO process for people who choose that for themselves ahead of time.
Okay, so this is going to be a little technical, but you and I have worked on this since Virginia Tech. So you have people that can be TDO'd. They are generally, using general language, a danger to themselves or somebody else.
Or substantially.
Right, that's the usual. And then there's certainly a quantum of care below that where they're not that bad off, but this would say that they may need to be put in a hospital. So is that sort of on the same page? They're incapable of making decisions, but they're not yet at a stage where they can't care for themselves, or because otherwise they could just be TDO. The whole point is there's some group of people that haven't hit rock bottom yet, but you can see it from here, as they say.
I think the intent behind this, having talked to Dr. Body's team, was to try to avoid the TDO for folks who live in the rural areas where there's not necessarily the two providers who can come together and make that judgment. Whether someone meets TDO qualification or not is a little irrelevant to the question of can you make a decision for yourself.
Right.
So it's really looking at the question, can you make a decision for yourself?
Okay, so some of us are a little concerned about the wide open designate, because remember, this is only going to come up when the person sitting in the other chair is saying, I don't want to go. Because if they want to go, we don't need this. They just go. The whole point is, I think you're off your meds, I think you are decompensating. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. And at some point they say, look, we got the advanced medical directive. I'm designating you capable of making this decision. And now I'm calling, I keep saying Dad, but I'm calling the person that you designated. I'm going to let them make the decision. The current law requires it to be a pretty high level doctor or psychologist. This makes it broader. How do you feel about the idea that the Community Service Board, whoever they designated, I think Delegate Farrell's right, one of our issues is in many places we don't have an on-staff psychologist, we don't have an on-staff psychiatrist. On the other hand, this is a pretty important decision you're making. You're forcing someone to go into care that they're telling you they don't want to do. That's the...
Speaking for myself, I could only support support this as long as the language on line 33 is in there that says I've authorized it in my advance directive. I have full understanding of what the impact of this is, and I've authorized this because in your example, I particularly trust my father in that example. And I know I live in rural Virginia, and I want to avoid that situation of having to be TDO'd. And so someone who fully understands that, and for the Ulysses Clause, they need to have signed off that they understand it, that's the only way that I can support this, is if it's a choice for somebody.
And that's why it's in the substitute.
Everybody, just the Ulysses clause she's talking about, if you remember, the problem was when you're of right mind, you say this is what I want, and when you're not, you say I don't want that. And we said we'll set up a special procedure where you can say, I know that next time this comes up, I will not be of right mind, and so I'm going to tell you I want it, and I'm telling you now I don't. This was an effort to try to address what was a pretty thorny conundrum. Okay, yes ma'am. I'm sorry, I'll go ahead and finish.
Can I touch on one?
Of course, I'm sorry.
Other piece, and it may make sense for me to touch on that after the next speaker, but I want to go back to something in here that's a little off topic from exactly what we've been talking about. Which do you want now?
Do your
Okay.
go ahead.
Outside of this process, if you look ahead to line 63, this now, I'm talking about the Ulysses Clause process, this now expands the number of and the qualifications of the people who can sign off that I understand my Ulysses Clause. So it increases my access as somebody who's writing an advance directive to be able to put the Ulysses Clause in, because now I don't have to take my 15 minutes precious doctor time to get the doctor to sign off that I understand. There's some other professionals who can sign that off also, or find one, yeah. And I think the two lists of professionals mirror each other, but the situation that they're being used in is completely different. And this I completely support, to be able to increase people's access to be able to fill out their advance directive.
Yes ma'am.
Good morning, Colin Miller for the Disability Law Center of Virginia. I haven't actually seen the substitute, but I do want to say I was invited by Professor Bonney and his group to participate in this discussion. Our intention is that this is a really tiny process, or a really narrow process change, maybe not a tiny one, that it would apply only to that decision about seeking voluntary inpatient treatment. It would not apply to treatment once you are there, would not apply to end-of-life decisions, would not apply to anything other than the need for voluntary mental health treatment.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, please step up and tell us, identify yourself, tell us your thoughts on the bill.
My name is Elena Floyd, I work for Vocal. I just wanted to say that Vocal, which is Virginia's organization of peers, supports this with the amendments. We generally don't want to make lives harder on ourselves and our peers, but this, with an advance directive, in a perfect world, we would have those. We would be able to think ahead. When things are well, we'd be able to put someone in charge. Everything you just heard is just affecting a small part, and we're comfortable with this, with the way that it's presented now. I think there's a change in 33, so I just wanted to say that.
All right, so everybody, the issues are before us. These are, I think, intellectually challenging and very important issues, and we're trying to decide when. We'd like to give as much autonomy as we can to the mentally ill, understanding that sometimes they're good at making choices and sometimes not so good, and that's sort of the issues we've had for a decade now. All right, what is any amendments on the bill? All right, what's our pleasure on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, move the report.
Delegate Scully moves and seconds, what's your report? This has no fiscal impact, I assume.
No, sir.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Chairman, okay,
Delegate Rasool.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, HB 2156, as briefly discussed in full committee, provides licensure for child welfare agencies who are operated by the Commonwealth, a child care facility operated by Virginia Tech. Let's say Virginia Tech and Social Services want to be able to oversee that. But currently, because of a sovereignty provision, they're not able to, but they have a memorandum of understanding. We want to put that in code. We went through to try to address the chairman's concerns. There was a side-by-side done. The way these agencies would be treated is exactly the same as with the private sector, except for the appeals process. And to try to prevent the 6 p.m. Meeting, Mr. Chairman, I would move to amend the substitute to withdraw that appeals process, so it would be subject to the normal normal APA procedure. So that way they would, while it could be fuzzy, they would be exactly like a private entity.
If you can have that one. So let's not do that yet though, let's just, so everybody's, my thought is, my only notion of this is that we should try to treat them as identically as we do Joe's childcare down the street. And I thought we want to have it neither more nor less, nor bigger or smaller, but about the same. And staff, you were walking me through, the issue is, because it's a government agency, and you have a government agency overseeing it, if there is a dispute or problem, we actually can't pursue the normal Joe's childcare. It can't be done the same, is that right?
We don't do that in the code. We don't go through the APA process when you have a government entity being sued by a government entity, or not even sued, but license has been denied. So this would create a process for review of those denials without having to go through that full APA process, which does include a court hearing and all of those options.
Okay. And all I was suggesting is if there's some, you can't find any other place in the code where we have something where you've got a cafeteria at a government building or some other sort of analogous process.
No, I can't.
Okay. So, everybody, what I'm saying is it might actually be closer to that to leave in what you had than to take it all out. Let me just ask staff, so what did you propose sort of as the analog for what a private provider wants to appeal would do? What was it you set up for the government?
So what we have in this.
Virginia Tech doesn't like an outcome, they want to appeal.
Right.
If they were a private agency, they could appeal through the APA
Yes.
and ultimately in the court.
What you have in the substitute here is a process that allows for an appeal, a written request from the commissioner to review the intended action that is proposed to be taken, opportunity to provide data and information to support your appeal.
What lines are you on, I'm sorry?
That's generally going to be found, so it's in the two new sections we add. We're looking at basically 134. We add a new section for summary orders of suspensions. That's applicable to group homes and children's residential facilities that are operated by agencies of the Commonwealth. Also, the second section that we add there, starting at 1157 of the substitute, that's the 63.2, 1710.2, is how you would appeal a notice of intent to take certain actions against a licensee.
Okay.
Oh.
And again, the issue is not the,
We haven't yet distributed the section.
I'm sorry, no, we're looking at all the wrong line items. Please, distribute this out. Is there a motion to adopt the substitute? All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? I'm sorry. All right, I'm sorry, do that again.
So looking on your substitute, that limits this to facilities, group homes and children's residential facilities, and then child welfare agencies is what the substitute's going to do.
All right, so what you're saying is this is where the commissioner wants to suspend. If I was a private provider, that's the point when I would go through the APA process and appeal, if you will.
So we're getting to the point of the appeal. What would happen if you were a private provider who's licensed by the state to do these things? You would have the right to go through the APA appeal process. If you are under this new bill, we will require state entities, state agencies, agencies of the Commonwealth that operate a child welfare agency will now have to be licensed by DSS to operate that child welfare agency or group home or residential facility. So if then there's an action against that license, a denial, a refusal to renew, or some other sort of action taken against that license, once that action has, once we're going to take that action, you have a right to appeal. You wouldn't go through the full APA appeal. Instead, what this bill does is for that very limited situation, creates an alternative appeals process so that a child welfare agency operated by an agency of the Commonwealth that is appealing an action against the license it has that has been issued by DSS would have the ability to request in writing that the Commissioner of Social Services review the intended action. They have the right to submit pertinent data and information to support their appeal. And then, if they don't like the Commissioner's decision, they have a further appeal to the Secretary of Health and Human Resources, who again will have the opportunity to review that and make a final decision on the proposed action.
Now, if we don't include the appeal, what that would mean would be the decision of the original officer would be final. And I guess that's the decision we have to make. I mean, if the argument would be, no matter what we do, it's something special. There's no way, we cannot do what everybody else gets. And so you could either say that you're not going to give them a special line of appeal because that's not fair, or you can say how we've created a special process nowhere else in the code just for this group. Delegate Russell, if we don't do the appeal, I guess that just means that they've got to be extra careful when they're being licensed by the commissioner, is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe that it's a stronger bill with the appeal process because it really is very hazy as far as what all the potential remedies are, in my opinion, and discussing with council. So it is stronger with having some kind of mechanism in place. It really isn't possible to have it exactly the way private net providers are.
Let me ask you this, what would you say to a private provider who is in downtown Blacksburg, who hears that this is coming, and actually likes the idea, of course, that you're now going to be licensed, but then says, but it's hardly fair because they have this special appeal that only they get because it's the government appealing the government's own process. You've already offered to take this out, so I'm not trying to suggest that's what you're trying to do. I'm just trying to sort of figure out what it means to have a special appeals process.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's an excellent question. I think any great child care provider would want to first and foremost ensure that that facility is being licensed and overseen by DSS. While they may come up with something else on the side, I believe that would be the first question: is why isn't this facility being licensed and overseen? And I am licensed and overseen.
I have a discomfort with I know you've worked very hard on trying to come up with the best appeal you can. This is sort of out of whole cloth. First thing, it just feels like one of those, feels like a special treatment, even though we're doing all we can to not be. Delegate Stolly and then Helsel.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not quite sure even who to ask this question. Don't we actually have a built-in national appeal process, the fact that they are an agency? I mean, if they think that they have not been treated fairly, they can appeal within the state government structure that already exists. They can take it up to the Secretariat and all the way to the governor and say, I think I was inappropriately treated. That's a mechanism that the private sector doesn't have and is available to state agencies and to portions of the state. Do we not already have built in for state agencies who are licensed a process that they can go through their leadership and have that resolved at a higher level?
I think this may be a different set of circumstances though, because what we're talking about is a very narrow situation in which you have a license to operate a child welfare facility. So primarily I think what we're talking about is daycares. There may be other entities that fall under that. So what you have is this license is for that daycare, and without this appeals process, what you do if you require, let's say daycare operated by a state agency, so perhaps one of our universities, to get the license, they would have to comply with all of the licensure requirements and all of the other pieces that would apply to a private entity exactly the same. So they would be treated exactly the same as a private in that situation. What we're doing by creating this special appeals process is saying, instead of allowing state agency operated daycares that have been licensed by the department to go through the full APA process, which does include a review by the commissioner in those pieces, which we have for the state agency ones, what they don't have is that next step that is an appeal to the court after they don't make the decision. So it ends with the commissioner instead of moving it further along. And it is, because it is relevant to that license to operate the child welfare agency, it would fall within this structure.
Okay. Delegate Helsel.
She just answered my question.
All right, so any member of the public like to be heard on this bill? All right, so I'm inclined, and I don't, if I'm the only one who's bothered by this, I'm not that inclined. I'm inclined to take the appeals out. I think that we are already sort of, it's always troubling to have sort of one agency monitoring another. I'm looking for nodding heads. Okay, so I'm going to take you up on your offer. All right, I'd ask staff if we want to strike the appeals process. So, Debbie, 134 through 156. And let's go further.
I'm sorry, you'd want to take out both sections there, 134 through 170, and that would then place the
They still have their license, they still have their, but it's,
well, that would place them back under the structure that we have for the privates, which would allow that APA appeal process.
I'm sorry. I thought we couldn't do that. That's great if we can. What's the problem?
I mean, that's how.
I'm just
try not to set a special.
Anybody? So we can add language since it's a final decision.
No, I'm not trying to make it harder, I'm just not trying to make it easier. If they can go through the normal process, that's what I would have wanted in the first place, and maybe we just didn't do a very good job. If in fact they can go through the process that everyone else goes through, then that would be the way to sort of square the circle, and just, they gotta be licensed.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think in striking those, your major concern is not creating something new here. And I think regardless in striking those, either if you're going through the normal APA process, is there somebody smarter than you here, or let me let them talk?
You're more knowledgeable, let's do that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I'm Margaret Schultz, Commissioner of Social Services. Right now, we believe that the Attorney General's office has told us they cannot follow the APA process, which is why there is necessary, should you want them to have an appeal, that there would need to be a process.
Don't leave, so
Yes, sir.
we're gonna reach a decision, move on real quickly. The concern would be if we can't use the normal process, unless we can make one that's the same with the different numbers in it, you've now created a unique special process that feels like special treatment, and so we're going to then not have any appeals process for this. If later it's determined they use APA, that's fine. If they can't, it's fine. If over the next 30 days, Daily Bristol comes up with something clever that makes it the same, that's fine. But that's sort of where I'm thinking right now. Is that okay? So I want to move we strike lines 134 through 170. Sorry to make you do all that work, Sarah. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. Okay, bill's before us. And again, at this point, we move the special appeal. So if it turns out APA works, it works. If it doesn't, and you want to do something else, come back. All right. What's our pleasure on the bill?
Move to report.
The motion made, second, report the bill. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. Okay, I see delegates Heretic, Hester, and Bell. We should be able to get all three done, but who came first? Delegate Hester, you're up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning. Tell us the problem and tell us what your bill does to fix it.
House Bill 2299. The problem is.
79.
2279.
Okay.
Every year, the Department of Defense comes up with about 10 key issues for military families. This is their #1 issue. The Secretary of Defense is required by law to coordinate with civilian child welfare and to obtain information of allegations of child abuse and neglect involving children in military families. MOUs have to be signed with state and local child welfare services to collaborate the oversight of cases involving military families. But the MOUs vary based on locality and branch of service. Local welfare agencies may not have the authority or direction to collect information concerning military affiliation of families. And there is no corresponding state statutory authority. That's the concern for state and local governments to share case information with appropriate DoD authorities. The legislation will facilitate a more consistent approach and result in collaborative oversight. Statutory authority would also allow for more consistent MOUs to be developed, thus allowing better coordination of local child welfare and military protective rehabilitative services to support military children and families through their CAP program or their family advocacy program. This legislation directs the civilian child welfare entities to collect military affiliation as a part of child welfare and neglect cases, and directs the entities to share pertinent case file information for alleged and founded cases with the appropriate military authorities. Once again, this is a top request of the Department of Defense to help their families help themselves.
And so currently they provide information when the complaint is founded. So they do the investigation and then send it over. And this would be to send the information over. That's the first thing.
Correct.
And then,
What the Department of Defense has found is that they want to work with families once a report is made. So even as the locality goes through the process of determining the case, whether it will be founded or not, the military Department of Defense wants to work with the family advocacy group to help a family, because there may be something going on.
Sarah, there's a drafting issue. So line 122, you add the word children of in front of active duty military personnel. Does that not then limit it just to the children? I'm just reading it. It currently says investigations involving active duty military personnel, but now would read investigations involving children of active duty members of the United States Armed Services.
I believe, and if anyone from the department wants to correct me, that was more of a technical wording change because the report is actually about the child and the child is alleged in abuse or neglect, more specifically than the person who may be subject to this neglect.
We're still trying to nail down what this does before we start talking about it.
Yes, sir. These are already involving, these are Child Protective Service complaints, so they're complaints involving children to begin with. So all we're talking about is if a complaint comes in involving a child under the age of 18, then at the moment that complaint comes in, it needs to be shared with the Family Advocacy Program instead of waiting until a
I'm just trying to get the wording. It does not include Adult Protective Services for MO. It does not include what spousal abuse.
No, sir. Only.
How is that the case? Is it just a code section or? Previously it said you shall send over all founded complaints involving active duty military personnel, which would be all of those, I would think.
Correct, but it's limited. You're in 1503, which is the Child Protective Services code section, so it's only limited to Child Protective Services.
Okay, I got it. That's fine. So it was the code area. Okay. Any other questions just with regards to what's there to the patron or staff? Delegate Bogey.
So as I see how, and I think how this bill would work, that initially, all these reports would be the job of the military to handle, and the Department of Social Services, their job would be making the referral. Will there be any follow-up from DSS? Or, because I see that this could really help with the workload that DSS has if ultimately the solutions have to come from the military anyway.
Well, there's going to be a collaboration with both parties. So when the child reports, it goes to the locality. This provides the locality the opportunity to then report it to the Department of Defense and for that collaboration to begin. They will still be engaged as the report moves through, because as I said, it could be founded or not founded in the end, but the Department of Defense gets to assist and work. And yes, they do have additional resources that we may not have.
Very good. All right, members of the public like to be heard on this issue. Yes, sir. Tell us who you are, tell us what talks the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I'm Alexander Soto. I'm your Deputy Secretary for Veterans and Defense Affairs. This initiative came from our VMAC, our Virginia Military Advisory Council. Secretary Harvey and the administration fully supports this bill. The installation commanders of our 30 installations across the Commonwealth have indicated that the family welfare is a critical issue for our installations here in the Commonwealth. And as the delegate indicated, Virginia right now has achieved and includes, through your actions, 9 out of the 10 DoD requests for family support. This is the 10th one. We have currently the requirement of the code. All this does is to move it earlier on the allegation so that DoD can commit the resources to support that family, who's a DoD family here in the Commonwealth. So we fully support it, and with this, Virginia will become the only state in the nation to have adopted the 10 DoD initiatives for family support and welfare. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee.
Okay. Sir, just, I think you're the closest we get. This is a request by DoD. In other words, this is something they would like us to provide.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so what's happening is information's coming in. Currently, you got to do all the investigating, decide if it's founded. This would bring them in earlier to the process so they could actually be part of that determination. Is that fair?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Delegate Sally.
I'd ask the Deputy Secretary, part of the issue as well as our local social services will continue to do the full investigation of this, but we see frequent moves with our military families, and they move from locality to locality and state to state. And if the military is not aware of the claims, they may not have been able to be fully investigated before the family moves again. This allows that continuity as the families move around to help protect the children. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Sir, from DSS, these are obviously very, very confidential issues. Yes, sir. I mean, you have a child saying something, you have all these things that come up. Do we have protocols in place to make sure that I mean, this is not something you share with almost anybody until it's founded, as we all know?
That's correct. This is very specialized, the information that we would share. In addition, we have MOUs that exist between the counties and these installations as to how we work together to address these issues. So this is very limited in the capacity of the information.
Do we know who at DOD, I'm just maybe kid, you wouldn't want to just leave this as a phone message on base saying, so-and-so, Chief Petty Officer so-and-so had this. I mean, is there some mechanism in place so it gets to an investigative agency of some sort? Or?
Correct. We actually have contacts through the family advocacy programs, through the military. That information is shared, and then we will actually work on our joint responses. So if both those are handling it, then we're working those together and hitting both resources.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for the patron or any of the speakers? Any other member of the public you can heard? All right. Motion's been made to report and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. We have Bell, Heretic, and then Peace has been added.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the
Yes. All right. Nikki, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a substitute to House Bill 1483, regular substitute.
Chris, we'll get to you. We'll make it. We'll get to you. Tell us the problem, tell us what the bill does to fix it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, this legislation cures a regulatory oversight. It allows occupational therapists to be designated as qualified mental health professional. Occupational therapists are educated and trained to provide mental health services. They specialize in activities of daily living, for example, working, eating, dressing, bathing, recreation, and so forth. The current legislation omits occupational therapists and occupational therapy assistants, despite statutory scope and practice recognition of their ability to perform mental health services.
What is this? Tell me about what does this get you once you are so designated?
Well, Mr. Chairman, without the recognition in the regulatory definition, the occupational therapists and assistants aren't recognized by the department as qualified mental health providers. It basically, anything they can do now lawfully, this will allow them to continue to do it. And with the substitute, I think we have the department support to do this, and there are folks here who can speak to it.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for the speaker? Yes, Delgare.
Just wanted to ask a point of clarification on line 13. It indicates shall require educational and clinical experience. Is that anything different than what's already in place?
It's, Mr. Chairman, Delegate, it's the very same.
Thank you.
Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Bell, was this part of the board's scope of practice review? Did they look at this? I know they were supposed to be.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Hodges, I can't answer that. I don't know if there's anyone present here.
Mr. Chairman, Hunter Jamerson for the Virginia Occupational Therapy Association. Delegate Hodges, to speak to your question, Virginia Occupational Therapy Association are reviewing our scope of practice and working with the department identified this as an inconsistency between statutory scope and regulatory authority. And Mr. Chairman, pertinent to your question with regards to the practical implications here, so presently OTs provide these same services in hospital-based settings without question. In inpatient facilities, these same services are clearly within occupational therapy scope of practice. When these same services are pushed out into outpatient settings, a different criteria or a different credential is in play, and that is the qualified mental health professional and the other definitions as set forth in the bill. These are credentials issued by Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. While OT's scope of practice in Virginia Code empowers them to do these services, they're not itemized among other providers providing these services on an outpatient basis. Working with the department, we've found, I think, the path forward to place them among that enumerated list.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Stelling.
I don't understand. So I'm a licensed occupational therapist already. I have a scope of practice. I can perform that scope of practice on any patient that I'm asked to perform that on. I don't understand why I need to have a different designation if, I mean, just because somebody has a mental health issue doesn't mean an occupational therapist can't take care of them within their scope.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Stelling, absolutely correct. I agree. Lawfully, OTs can provide these services in the community in an inpatient setting anywhere in Virginia under Virginia law. However, employers hire based on obtaining specific credentials. The specific credential issued and play here is DBHDS's Qualified Mental Health Professionals credential, and only those professions specifically itemized to the regulation are eligible to receive that credential. So while we may lawfully provide the services, employers are seeking OTs that have this credential. Without the regulatory change, the credential is not available to us.
Madam Chair, is there some additional training I need beyond my occupational therapy training to get this designation?
Madam Chair, Dr. Stelling, no sir. Your OT training qualifies you to perform these services. It would qualify you to meet the definition of a qualified mental health professional, but absent a regulatory change to enumerate OTs among the list of those eligible to receive the credential, the department is not able to award us the credential.
Anyone else who has questions for that paper? I do. Is this going to require more fees for occupational therapists to have to pay? I mean, is this just another routine licensure bill to make more hoops for occupational therapists to jump through?
Madam Chairman, great question. And my organization, Virginia Occupational Therapy Association, is the professional organization for all of Virginia's occupational therapists. It has unanimous support of our board. The impact statement tells us that the department would not raise fees or require any fiscal contribution from the state in order to do this. This will simply empower our applications to be approved.
And one more question, they already pay a fee to get what, a certificate now, or what do they get besides a license?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Cookie, so presently occupational therapists are licensed through the Board of Medicine and the Department of Health Professions. They already pay a statutorily required fee for that licensure. They will not, under this bill, be required to pay any additional fees.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Eric. Yes, ma'am.
Just one additional clarifying question. So moving them now into the QMHP category, there would be no circumstances where they would now qualify for a position that requires that category that they wouldn't as an occupational therapist. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Eric, that's correct.
Okay. Any member of the public would like to be heard on this bill?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Diane Franklin-Simons. I have been an occupational therapist and worked in mental health for over 30 years. I teach occupational therapy now. And so I want to present you with a document that I have had duplicated for you that's produced from the American Occupational Therapy Association that describes the extent of occupational therapy work in the area of mental health. I've sat here for 2 days now and heard a number of issues that are pertinent to Virginia in the area of mental health. This would give an opportunity that is well needed for from agency standpoints to be able to hire occupational occupational therapists in outpatient settings. So can I just distribute this? Or have it distributed?
All right, everybody, just so you know where we're at, so we have 3 bills left from non-committee members. It would be really nice to try to get those done so they don't have to join us. We are absolutely going to come tonight, but I'm trying to not have them have to join us at 6 on Tuesday.
Move to report.
Second. Motion has been made to report the bill and seconded. Oh, the substitute, I'm sorry, yes. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. All right, let me ask, thank you, Delegate Bell. All right, we have Heretic, Peace, and we hope to get O'Bannon in, so let's see if we can do this. If we can't, we can't, but if we can. All right, Delegate Heretic, you have a sub, is that right?
I do, sir, there's a substitute on this.
All right. While they're distributing, if you describe the problem, describe how the sub gets us in.
Mr. Chairman, members, this is House Bill 2231. This is one of the measures that has been proposed in response to the tragic death of Michael Mitchell in Baton Rouge Regional Jail as a result of some lapses of continuity of care and to address his decompensation and mental health status. Mr. Chairman, members, the substitute that's being circulated currently would conform this bill to a Senate bill which was passed out yesterday, which would basically require the community service boards which service any regional jail would establish or work with existing memorandum of understanding between them so as to allocate the roles and responsibilities of each organization to make sure that there is care, continuity of care, including mental health care for every inmate, and there's pre-admission screening for inmates being committed to regional jail facilities so that there is no drop in care. It's my understanding, Mr. Chairman, that the amendment that passed out of the Senate eliminates any financial impact such that basically this is revenue neutral. This bill, I hope, is uncontroversial in that it only requires community service boards to actually cooperate together and to evaluate their memorandum of understanding to make sure that these services are provided and that they are coordinated in their
So we need staff to read us the line amendment, please.
Mr. Chair, the line amendment's on page 1, line 28. After a regional jail shall strike be required through the rest of the paragraph. And insert, review any existing memorandum of understanding between the Community Services Board and any other community services board that serve the regional jail to ensure that such memorandum sets forth the roles and responsibilities of each community services board in the pre-admission screening process, provides for communication and information sharing protocols between the community services boards, and provides for due consideration, including financial consideration, should there be disproportionate obligations on one of the community services boards, period.
Okay. In essence, Mr. Chairman, it simply requires that they coordinate efforts.
Okay. Delegate Kogi?
Move the amendment.
Motion moved. The amendment has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. So now it's in the posture of the patron wants. Delegate Kogi.
I just want to know if the community services boards are behind this.
They are, ma'am, and we do have a representative from the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health Care and Developmental Services here to address the issue if you need to hear.
Let's just say this, if you object, stand up, otherwise it's moving. Okay. Now, this has a FISC for the computer, so the way the proper procedure will be, we'll report, refer, and if at some point over the next few days you get it corrected, then it'll go directly to the floor, otherwise it is going up, so you should pursue a correction to the FISC if this fixes it. All right. So the motion is to make it report and refer, I'm sorry, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any member of the public like to be heard on this bill? Again, it's about to report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you, Delegate Harrigan. Delegate Peace. Delegate O'Bannon, are you here? I saw you.
I am, sir.
Okay, good. I just can't see you behind the podium. Are we here? All right. Delegate Peace, and we'll try to do both of these.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time. House Bill 1945. And let me just give a very brief background, and then I do have some amendments to adopt that will address the fiscal impact under number 10 of the fiscal impact statement. So with that said, about 2 years ago when I was chairing the Commission on Youth, we had a presentation from DARS, and it was a report on efforts that Utah had made regarding protecting seniors from adult accidents.
We can no longer hear you, so just project.
I'm going to keep going.
Go.
And it was revealing, and it chronicled how much money is being
process of this study, the agency held 4 meetings between July and October. These were inclusive sessions, including financial institutional representatives and others. The work group report highlights 8 recommendations, including changes to certain definitions in the code, which I'm here to do today, in improving trainings for APS workers and developing educational materials in financial institutions. A few of the recommendations from this effort did not require legislative action and can be accomplished through collaborative efforts between state and local APS staff. For those members of the Appropriations Committee, I hope, and as we go forward in the future, we'll also look at more adequate funding for APS, much like we've invested in CPS. APS is equally important. I want to thank Commissioner Rothrock and all of his staff who helped to convene the study and the off session as a result of legislation last year, and I believe that with action on this legislation, we'll take a great step forward in protecting adults from financial exploitation. Members of the committee should note that the estimated loss to Virginians in this population is $1.2 billion in 2015. So this bill, House Bill 1945.
If you give us, I don't mean to hurry you along, but
I'm right there.
Somebody behind you.
Yep, I understand. So this bill would broaden the definition of adult exploitation. It would include unauthorized use of adults' finances, including acts that breach fiduciary duties to the adult, and those involving undue influence, broadens the definition of financial institution staff. And if I can have the amendments reported, these are friendly amendments offered by me, and I would ask that you adopt the amendments.
Okay, go ahead. Staff will report the amendments, please.
Mr. Chair, there's 7 amendments. I'll do them as quick as possible. The first is on page 2, line 61, after an adult, insert as defined in section 63.2-1603. The second amendment is on page 2, line 71, after adult, strike as defined in section 63.2-1603. Third amendment is on page 2, line 74, after it includes Romanet 1, strike A, insert an intentional. Fourth amendment is on page 2, line 74, after detriment or, strike A, insert an intentional. Fifth amendment is on page 2, line 78, after or advantage, insert if the adult did not agree or was tricked, misled, or defrauded into agreeing to pay for such goods or services or to perform such services. The Sixth amendment is on page 2, line 82, after an adult, insert as defined in section 63.2-1603. And the seventh and final amendment is on page 2, line 90, after an adult, insert as defined in section 63.2-1603.
And just so you know, Mr. Chairman, adult means any person 60 years of age or older, or any person 18 years of age or older who is incapacitated who resides in the Commonwealth, provided however adult may include qualifying non-residents who are temporarily in the Commonwealth and who are in need of temporary emergency protective services. That's the 63.2 definition. Just it narrows it down. It removes the fiscal impact or the fiscal impact statement. I have a lot of people who are supporting the bill. There was no opposition, and I ask that you report the bill.
Let me ask you this. Hesitate to slow down the train, but the expression, the acquisition of financial resources through the use of undue influence, I know what it means, coercion, I know what it means, duress, I know what it means, harassment. Is that a term of art when they string those 4 together? So I say I want a car. No, I really want a car. And I badger my 70-year-old father every day until finally he buys me a car. That's not undue influence, it's not coercion, it's not duress. Harassment is the loosest of those terms.
It's not a term of art in its string as it's laid out. It's to include each of those services individually, and it has to also, if you look at little I3, include the forcing or coercing the adult to pay for goods against the will. And then
That's an
yes, that's why I'll make sure that it's all sort of together, and this is tracking the recommendations of the report. And if y'all would like to read the report, I can have copies of the House document 13.
Okay, and it doesn't make it smaller because it says it shall include this. So you have everything we've got now, plus this category, but the harassing has to be and coercing an adult. Is that right? Sir, do I have it right? Or am I, ors and ands here?
Mr. Chair, are you just trying to discern whether
if you harass someone out of their property, that's all you do.
That would meet the second prong here. Are you trying to figure out if it has to do, if you have to meet 1 and 3 as well? because all of them are required. Or,
That's what I'm asking. I'm just trying to see what limits harassment. Again, the other three have very specific understandings. Harassment doesn't. I'm just wanting to make sure we're not covering the badgering my son does about Xbox games.
And it still has, Mr. Chairman, in line 70, my introduced version of adult exploitation, it still has to mean, it still has to be illegal. And then we're broadening by saying unauthorized and improper, and then we have the amendment that adds intentional as well.
Is that right?
that's correct.
Okay, so, but it says that adult exploitation includes this.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's merely an example of something that would meet this definition of adult exploitation.
So where there's question that exploitation may be occurring, this would be.
Let's do this. I don't want to, my advice would be we report it up. It's been worked a lot, and I can take this up over the next couple of days before it gets to full. Is that?
Move for report.
Are we comfortable with that?
Chairman.
With the amendments. All right, committee minutes are moved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have staff to go and do it as a sub, just, I think it's much simpler to see it all at once.
I appreciate that.
By the time we get upstairs,
Thank you.
or next door. Now, it's gotta be report referred, because at this point, we have a FIS. The FIS might be gone by the time it gets further along. So, we make, all right, we substitute the move's motion, move and report. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, very good.
Yes, and there are a lot of people here to support it, but I appreciate your time.
Very good. Okay. All right, last one, and if we get this done, then nobody has to come on Tuesday night but us. That's right. Dr. Bannon, it is 11:30, everybody's got other things they're gonna get to. Tell us the issue.
This is, House Bill 2213 is actually a very straightforward policy decision. And what this bill does is to our temporary assistance for needy families program, it shortens the windows from 24 months to 12 months, and also the time period of ineligibility. The concept here is that TANF is really a temporary program to help people get back to work, get their jobs, get back on their feet. And I think there is data that if you shorten this, it makes it improves the program, and more people get off the TANF program if you shorten it. And so one fellow who's here can speak for about a minute, and then I'm sure there'll be folks that are opposed, and I hope you'll take action.
All right, so everybody, we are not trying to shorten anybody's ability to speak on any issue. So if this is an issue that's important, please don't feel pressured by time. We're just trying to get everybody who's here for this not have to come back. Yes, sir. Tell us, identify yourself, and tell us your thoughts on the bill.
Sure. My name is Greg Pfister. I'm with the Foundation for Government Accountability. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Welfare programs are supposed to be temporary, and they're designed to help people that are experiencing extraordinary life circumstances. What's evident in a 2015 Kansas study is that when government expands welfare programs in the name of compassion, people have a tendency to stay longer, keeping them in poverty. And when people are put in circumstances that require them to seek employment because of their time on the safety net has expired, they do just that. A good job is the only solution to poverty. This does not affect the various hardship provisions, and I encourage you to support this bill. Thank you.
Okay, any other member of the public like to be heard in favor of the bill? Any member of the public like to be heard in opposition to the bill? Please step up, tell us your thoughts on the bill, and then we'll take questions and comments from the panel.
Mr. Chairman, Tom Steinhaus with the Department of Social Services. The administration is strongly opposed to this bill. This bill will impact children negatively. They will lose child care, they will lose other services. Living assistance may not give these recipients enough time in the VIEW program to get the education and skills they need to get a good job. This bill, usually when we have cuts like this, it's because we're trying to get to just some general funds. This bill will not reduce general funds at all. As Delegate O'Bannon knows, I think Delegate Stawley knows, because they had to sit to my presentation on TANF and appropriations, Virginia is required to spend $128 million of general fund on this program every year, no matter how far we reduce the caseload. So it's not going to reduce any general fund savings, and it may even increase general funds because child support caseload for TANF will be going down and they will lose money.
What happens to the money if you're not sending out out as checks? What happens to it?
It will go to the TANF surplus. I'm sure you've all heard about the growth of the TANF surplus.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Identify yourself. Tell us your thoughts on the bill.
Good morning. I'm Emily Griffey with Voices for Virginia's Children.
And I agree that this bill will really impact and harm Virginia's children and families. As you heard, there is right now a $90 million TANF surplus in unspent funds, and that's because the cases have gone down in recent years to about 10,000 families for the last 5 years. A family on TANF needs to be earning 30% of poverty. They receive a benefit that's around $300 a month for a family of 3. The families work hard. They are in school or in a work activity for 35 hours a week. So there's no reason that these families are not deserving. But the road to self-sufficiency is not a straight path. You move forward and backwards, and you often need some time to get to self-sufficiency. Aisha is here today to tell her story. She was receiving TANF benefits and is now making it on her own. So I wanted to let you know, to hear from somebody that this would impact.
Hi, my name is Aisha Walker.
Ms. Walker.
I'm just speaking on behalf of, I benefited from the TANF program. I believe that it's a good program. If the program was cut, I think that it would be very devastating to people because poverty is real, and the TANF program is a good program that helps me and help my children as well.
Thank you. Appreciate you stepping forward. Yes, ma'am. Identify yourself, tell us your thoughts on the bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Virginia Hurd. I'm here on behalf of the Virginia Poverty Law Center, and we too stand opposed to this bill. This bill would significantly devastate families who are trying to become self-sufficient, trying to become independent. TANF cash assistance is extremely low, as you just heard from Ms. Griffey. In 2012, Department of Social Services study, or analysis rather, showed that the program is working as it stands, and that study was specific to the time limits. It showed that for the largest portion of TANF cases, which are 75%, that the median time spent on the program was approximately 12 months. That means that about half of those individuals were able to get off of TANF within that 12-month period, but there are others who still need additional time to be able to become self-sufficient. The Commission on Youth, which is a bipartisan commission, just completed a comprehensive review of TANF and issued a series of recommendations. None of those recommendations indicated any need for any adjustment in the time limits as they are currently demonstrated, being 24 months on, 24 months off, etc., for a lifetime limit of 60 months. This bill would devastate those families who are trying to reach sufficiency. These families are required to work, and the information shows that the VIEW program is working. According to DSS in fiscal year 16, there were 21,041 participants in VIEW, 19,084 participated in approved work activity, 12,939 entered a permanent work employment, and their average monthly earnings were almost $1,200. These individuals are receiving the help that they need, not only financially, but also to get the employment that will allow them to maintain self-sufficiency. This program is working. It is doing what we need it to do, assisting individuals in getting out of poverty. This cut would devastate that and impact the Commonwealth very, very negatively. I would ask that this bill not be passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Identify yourself. Tell us your thoughts on the bill.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, James Pickrell with Virginia League of Social Services Executives. We are opposed to the bill. We feel that 12 months is not always a necessary amount of time to get someone to self-sufficiency, which is what the TANF program is about, and we're afraid it might actually be counterproductive. Therefore, we would ask that the bill not go forward. Thank you.
Just one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Identify yourself.
Chairman, I'm Frank McKinney with Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, and we are opposed to the bill. We in fact think the bill is kind of hard on people, mean-spirited, based on the reduction from 24 to 12 months. And we would ask that you all not approve this bill.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Any member of the panel have any questions for the patron? Any member of the panel would like to make any comments about the bill? All right. Good man, you got the last word.
Well, thank you, sir. I think it's a pretty straightforward policy decision. It's not mean-spirited at all. The goal here is to get people out of poverty, and I think that by reducing the timeline, we'll be able to do that. So I hope you'll report that.
We will entertain motions. Motion has been made, reported, and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. No's mark your hand. Okay. The last measure is House Bill 2097 from Delegate Price. We had a request to strike the bill. I think we can just table it. Is that okay? So at the request of the patron, I'll entertain a motion to table House Bill 2097. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. Okay. Everybody, so we got everybody done except us. That does mean that several of us have bills. I'm not one of them. Before the subcommittee, we will get through as quickly